Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. So I thought we'd have a bit of fun today with a new cane design. So I've called this one the Spirals cane, simply because it's made up of a lot of individual elements of spirals. And I've done this one just because I wanted to have a new element to add into cane designs, and having done it, I thought it'd be quite nice to put several of them together to create a new cane. So this is one of the colour options, and this is one I'm going to do today, but at the end I will show you various other colour options, and I'm going to show you both in the hexagon, so the triangular cane, but also putting it together to create a square cane, so you can come up with a design like this if you would rather. As I explain when I'm going through this, I have done this several times, and each time I've done it, I put them together, the 5 elements, a slightly different way, and each time you put them together, you'll come with a slightly different outcome. So, as per normal with my videos, please don't stress. Just put these elements together however you want to in your particular cane, and whatever design you get should kaleidoscope nicely. Hopefully relatively simple, because once you've done it once, you're just going to repeat it 5 times. So let's move on to the equipment you need for today's session. The equipment I'm using today is very simple because all we're doing is creating a cane. I work on a large ceramic tile. I will be using a polymer clay blade. I sometimes refer to these as tissue blades, but it's really sharp to cut down nice slices through your cane. A little craft knife. Something like this, which is a 4mm cable needle, and I use this simply to manoeuvre the cane slices together, nothing else. So anything along these lines, anything similar will work. You will need a roller or something to create a nice round groove in your cane elements. This is a 1/2 inch 1.25cm one for polymer clay, and I also use a brayer roller when I'm creating the veneers. To help create the veneers and to help create the canes, I use a measuring sheet. This is freely downloadable from www.printablepaper.net. I laminate mine, so I make them easy to work on, and I've gone for the 4 squares to 1 inch one, but you can also download them in centimetres if you prefer. And when I'm creating my veneer, I put my slices onto scrap clay, so I've just got probably about half a pack, about sort of 1 ounce, 28 grams of scrap clay. And I also use, to neaten up my cane slices, an old blunt polymer clay blade, which I have completely taped off the sort of slightly sharp side with masking tape, so I can use these to straighten up my cane slices with no fear whatsoever of cutting my fingers. And then to create a nice smooth finish to my veneers, I use a stainless steel soap and then a piece of wax paper big enough to fit over my veneer pieces. If you don't have any wax paper, greaseproof paper, tracing paper, baking parchment, baking sheet, just something along those lines, just to smooth over so that when you're rubbing the clay, you've got a protective sheet in between. As I said, I'm not creating a finished article today, but I will mention a few other tutorials which do have finished articles in them, and so you can follow those if you want to create something with your pieces. Other than that, I use biodegradable wet wipes to clean my hands as I go along, and my tools and equipment. If you don't want to use wet wipes, then a wet cloth works perfectly fine instead, and I do use a couple of dry tissues so that if I have used the wet wipes, then I can dry anything down. I will also be using a pasta machine dedicated to polymer clay use. If you don't have a pasta machine, you can simply stack layers of playing cards on either side of your clay and roll the clay out in between to get nice thin sheets of the clay. So that's all we need for the equipment, so let's move on to the clay. For today's project, I'm using Fimo Soft polymer clay, but all well-known or recognised brands of polymer clay will work well for this technique. I'm going to create a variety of Skinner blends and in these various colours. However, if you don't want to use Skinner blends, then you can simply use the plain colours. It's up to you. And the other thing I would also mention is I'm using probably twice as much clay here as you need to do, because when I do this example for you, I'm going to do half of it as a triangle and then do another half as a square to give you options. So you can absolutely do this cane half the amounts, and then of course it's much easier to reduce as well. But I'm telling you the full amounts that I'm using, so just halve them if you want to make smaller cane. So I'm going to do 3 small Skinner blends, 2 larger Skinner blends, and then quite a large one with all these colours, and the black's just the outline colour, and this is slightly more than you need, but it's better to have slightly more than too little. So for the amounts we've got, for the small blends I've got white, apple green, white brilliant blue, the emerald green and the white, and I say I'm going to do blends between all of those, and they are 1/4 ounce or 7 grams of each of these. For the larger blends I'm going to go white, peppermint, white and lilac, and these are 1/2 ounce or 14 gram blocks. We've then got the same amount, 1/2 ounce or 14 grams of the white, same as these, so 1/4 ounce or 7 grams of the lavender. I've then got 1/3 ounce or 10 grams of raspberry, and then 3/4 ounce or 21 grams of the plum. And then the black, I've got a whole of a small pack, so about 2 ounces, 56 grams of the black. And the first thing I'm going to do is condition all of these colours in these separate amounts, and put all of them, if I can, into just a roughly sort of square or rectangular shape. It only has to be rough. And when I condition my clay, I will do it on the pasta machine, and I will do it through setting 3, which is a medium setting of my pasta machine. If you're unsure about conditioning polymer clay, I will put a link to my video which has some hints and tips and techniques for how to condition polymer clay quickly, particularly using a pasta machine. But other than that, say I put all of these through on setting number 3 on my pasta machine, and on my pasta machine 0 is thick and 9 is thin. And I'll bring you back when I've got this done, and we'll probably start doing the skinner blend on one of these 2 larger pieces. Having conditioned the clay nicely, I'm going to do a skinner blend between the white and the lilac, and then one between the white and the peppermint. So I'll just do one at a time, so I'll do those ones to start with. Now, as you can see, I've put them roughly into rectangular shapes, but it is only rough. You don't have to be neat, because they will get distorted when they go through the pasta machine. And also, as I mentioned earlier, although I'm going to do skinner blends throughout, if you don't want to do a skinner blend, just use a single sheet or a plain colour. And then when I've finished doing the skinner blend and I put it into a particular shape, just move your colour into that particular shape. I'm doing a straightforward skinner blend where we cut diagonally through the 2 pieces, and then because I've got 2 layers, put one on top of the other and put them back together with the diagonal on the going down the middle. If you're unused to doing skinner blends or need a few tips and techniques, I do have a video and I'll put a link to that in the details below this one for you. So having folded it in half again, because it's easier then to put through the pasta machine so it's not going to spread apart, I'm going to pinch where the join was so that it goes through the pasta machine more easily, and as I've now got 4 layers, I'm going to put it up to a thicker setting, so setting number 2 of my pasta machine. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put it through, constantly fold bottom to top till I end up with a nice blend from the white going all the way through to the peppermint, and I'll bring you back when we've got that blend done. So now I've got that nice blend from the white through to the blue, and what I did each time was I pushed it up against the edge of the pasta machine, alternating the white side one time and the blue side the next time. So I've kept it fairly short so it hasn't spread out through the whole length of the pasta machine. And all I'm going to do now is you can either chop it or fold it, and I'm going to just do it into 3 pieces because I don't want these too wide, and stack them on top of each other. And if you've got an odd one, just generally stack it down so it's placed in the middle. I'm then going to pick that up. I'm going to pinch this side because we're going to put it through the pasta machine this end first, always the darker end first, and then because I've got 3 layers of clay, pinching it just means that the pasta machine is able to put it through more easily. Put it through on the same setting that we've got at the moment, so that's on setting number 2 to give us a longer, thinner strip. Once that's done, I'm going to progress down to my thinnest usable setting on the pasta machine, which for me is setting number 9. And I know I can go straight down to setting 9, but if you know that your pasta machine has a tendency to shred or tear your clay, then just go down 1 setting at a time until you get to your thinnest usable setting. So I now have a nice long thin strip of polymer clay, and you need to decide which end is going to be the end towards the top of the spiral and which is going to be the bottom of the spiral. So I'm going to do the darker coloured end at the top of the spiral and have the lighter or white colour at the bottom. Now you can just create a concertina effect where it's a square or a rectangle, so effectively you do it quite nice and broad all the way down. But if you can, just help you slightly, if you can start it quite thin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just folding backwards and forwards, pressing down on the folds as you go to make sure there's no trapped air, and then you can get slightly wider as you go down. If you want to do it just as a plain rectangle, that is absolutely fine. And all you'd then do is when I change the shape of this, when I've finished doing this concertina ring, you will just change the shape of your rectangle into the shape we're going to do at that stage. So as you can see there, it started thinner and has gone slightly wider. So mine are always very messy. Yours might be lovely and neat, in which case brilliant, but mine aren't. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to press it flat on the tile to just even out, to make it more even top and bottom. And then I am going to press this nice and thin and then have it going more down to sort of a wedge shape at the bottom. Height-wise, I'm going to go probably to about 1.5 inches. Something like that on your measuring sheet, so it goes slightly thinner. And if you can, try and keep it even from this end to this end and across the profile, both at the top and the bottom. Okay, so something like that. Once you've done that, and just to give you an idea, that's probably about 2 inches, say by just over 1.5 inches high. What you're going to do is you're going to take your little roller. Now for these swirls, for the two bigger ones, we're going to we want quite a lot of swirl and very little on the back end, so to speak. So this is going to be the bottom of my swirl, and this is going to be the bit that actually twists inside. So for this one, I'm going to take my roller and go really quite a long way down towards the base and press in quite a lot. So let me pick that up to show you. You can see there I've pressed in quite hard with the roller. Whilst the roller is still in place, with my finger or thumb, I'm actually going to pull this clay slightly up and over. You see that? So that when you take the roller out, you've got quite a nice lip here. And then I'm just going to push where we had that other curl over and elongate the rest of this until, as we said before, we've got a nice sort of point on this end. So this creates the space that our spiral is going to curl up into and sit inside of this. So having done that with the peppermint, I'm going to do exactly the same with the lilac, and I'll bring you back when they're both done. So there are two pieces with the curls in, and those are going to make the two larger swirls in our piece. So now we're going to move on to the smaller ones. So with the smaller ones, I'm going to do a skinny blend between the white and the emerald, the white and the brilliant blue, the white and the apple green. As I said before, if you don't want to do a skinny blend, then simply just choose a plain colour and just do a plain colour. So I'll just do one as the example, and then I'll be doing exactly the same with all three. Same as with the larger ones, just roughly into rectangles. Simple skinny blend. Put those pieces together with the diagonal. Fold in half, pinch so it's easy to go through the pasta machine, and put back through on setting number 2 till we've got a nice blend, and I'll bring you back when I've got that one done. So there we go with our blend done, and I was going to chop this one into 2 pieces, and I'm going to do exactly the same as we did before. Just pinch the ends, put it back through the same setting of the pasta machine to get a longer blend, then straight down to my thinnest usable setting, get a lovely long blend, and I'll bring you back when I've got to that stage. Now this one, there's going to be a very slight difference in the sort of spiral we're going to make. So for this one, we're going to have quite narrow at one end and at the other with larger in the middle. So you can do that whilst you're concertinaing, or as I said before, if you find it easier, just concertina it into a rectangle and then change the shape of it once that is done. But I'm going to do it so it's nice and thin on either end. As before, neaten it up, and I'm neatening it up by just pressing in on either end. And for want of a better shape, I sort of think of these a bit like sort of propellers on a plane, where you've got the blades coming off the middle around a bit. So you can go nice and pointed at either end. You do want to make them roughly the same height as your bigger pieces, so this one needs to go slightly taller. So you can do that. Once it's roughly the right height. Again, you're going to decide which piece is going to be your middle swirl and which piece is going to be the end. So as with the larger ones, I'm going to make the colour as the middle. And for this one, where you've got your larger part in the middle, this is where we're going to put the roller in. So again, slightly to one side of the middle, and exactly the same before, put the roller in, force the clay up, and all I'm doing is with my finger I'm just pushing it slightly up and round the roller, so that when you remove it and just twist it to remove it, you've got a little lip on your piece. And then exactly the same as before, I'm just going to narrow and spread out the bit above the lip, and this bit's going to be the bit that twirls and then sits in that round, and this time we've got a nice tapered edge that's going to fit into our design. So that's the two different ways to do the spirals and to get the base clay in the right shape. So one's, as you can see, has got quite a stub-ended piece where we're going to swirl into, and one's got more of a tapered end. So I'm going to do exactly the same as I've just done with this blue one for the emerald and white and the green and white, and I'll bring you back when I've done those two pieces, so we've got all three pieces looking similar to this. So there's the emerald one, and there's the apple green one. As you see, they're not perfect, but they're just roughly similar, and they're all going to come out slightly different, and that's the great thing, and when we reduce it, they change as well. So those are the 5 elements all ready to make the swirl. Now you can do a very simple swirl just by putting another colour around the one back side of the swirl and then twisting it up. But I'm going to do another Skinner blend because A, I think it looks nice, and B, it's good practice. I use Skinner blends a lot in my work, and I'm a great advocate of the old adage that practice makes perfect. And I know a lot of people are worried about them, but the more you do and the more you practice, the easier they become to do, which is why we've done so many in this one and why I do so many in all of my tutorials. And for the stripe around the back, I'm going to do a mix from the plum to the raspberry to the lavender and then the white, and I've got differing amounts of those depending on how much I want. So there's not going to be an awful lot of white left at the end, but the purple is going to be the main part down the side, and we're going to end up with a Skinner blend that's slightly wider than our pieces, and then we can decide which end we're going to put which, and it will give us a little bit of cut off on either end. So you've probably got a bit more here than you need, but it's always nice to have a little bit of extra leftover Skinner blend. So because I've got the 4 colours in this one, the 2 end pieces are exactly the same as normal, and then middle ones we're just going to do a stripe. Now I'm not overly worried about the differing sizes, because this is the message I'm trying to get across with Skinner blends. You don't need to be neat. You don't need to worry about them. Just shove them together and have a look. There's some great polymer clay artists out there who have some really good tips on Skinner blends and how to get different types of blends and everything else. I tend to use just the straightforward ones in my videos because I want people just to practice. But you can see there, that is not neat. That's not even an oblong. But by the time you fold this up, do as we've done before, put the crease in, or say press in a nice little bit at the bottom to make it easier to go through the pass machine that first time. Once you put it through, keep putting it through. As I said, I always butt up to one edge, and also in my video on Skinner blends I'll show you how to keep it that nice straight rectangular shape. This will come out in a nice blend, so you don't need to worry overly much when you're putting them together. Okay? So I'll bring you back when we've got this one in a nice rectangle with the purple on one side all the way through to the white on the other. So once you've got your blend going nicely, you need to look at it in relation to the size of your piece. Now this blend is only going to go from here and up to the top. So as you can see, I've got quite a lot excess here which I don't need. So what I need to do is I need to move this down or shorten it. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. So you can manipulate it when it's inside the pass machine by butting it up to one end and then just sort of pushing it or pulling it up tight to that. Or you can, if you want to, manipulate it out of the pasta machine by just simply pushing your slab of clay until it's slightly smaller, and each time do it until you end up with a piece that's just slightly bigger. So actually that's not far off what I want, but I'll do it a couple of times just to get it just slightly bigger to fit around these 2 pieces. So having got it down to roughly the right size, I'm going to cut off one end, make that nice and straight, put my piece just resting gently because we're not attaching it at the moment, cut off a slice. And then with some of my black clay, and I've just taken probably about 2/3 of it here, I've put it through on setting number 3 at the moment, and I've made sure it's just roughly the right size, and by doing that I'd folded it in half, and then if it was too narrow I'd actually pulled it slightly wider until it fitted in, and then just put it back through that same setting. So I've just done that again now, so I know I've got a piece the right size, and now I'm going to put this down on the thinnest setting. So for me that's setting number 9, put it that way through, so that we're just going to put a very thin layer of the black either side of this strip. So I'm just going to lay my piece across, cut the black top and bottom, and I'm just going to, before I do that, I'm just going to neaten off either end my strip. So it's now going to go back on there, and I'm going to go just slightly wider at the top end. Because what I'm going to do is, because I've got the dark end at the top, I'm going to put the light end at the top. So this end I'm going to taper. So having got it on that side, I'm going to pop him over, put him back down on that side, chop off the same, and then I'm going to pinch all down the end of where the white end of our blend is, and then chop off the excess black so it's nice and neat. Then I've got a nice tapered end, and then I'm just going to chop off the excess black, which you can see on that end. So now we have our nice border that's going to go around our piece, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to sit it just slightly proud of the tip of my piece, and then just start to bend it over. Make sure it's added to the back, and then very, very gently just start to persuade this piece round. And what we're going to do is this first bit is going to tip over really tightly. If it starts to spread up that way, just press it in with your hands, keep it the same height as all the rest, and you're just going to tip this in and tip it round until it starts to create a nice swirl. Take your time, doesn't have to be rushed. But what should happen is that it's going to fill all the way down until it reaches in to that gap that we made for it earlier, and you end up with a lovely swirl with your colour gradient going through it. If you want to, just chop the end off so it's level, just to neaten that piece up, and that's the first element of our cane done. So I'm going to do exactly the same with the lilac one, and I'll bring you back when I've got that done. Okay, so those are our 2 larger pieces done. So now we're going to do exactly the same with the smaller pieces. So at the moment this blend is still too wide, so I'm going to put it back through the pasta machine as we did before. Press it in, concertina it in until we get a size that's just slightly wider than these. When you've got that done, and it's roughly the right width, just have a quick check to see if you can fit all 3 of your pieces on. Now I'm not going to be able to because I've got this little bit missing here, so I could go down and make it slightly narrower, but of course the simpler thing, I've got it on setting number 2 at the moment, so if I put that down to setting number 3 and put it through that way, then I should have enough to go across all 3 pieces. So let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. Perfect, no problem. So I'm now going to do exactly the same as I did with the others. So get the rest of my black, put it through to a piece that's on setting number 9, my thinnest setting, the same width, and then we will cut the pieces, cover them in black, and swirl around these in exactly the same way. Okay, so it is exactly the same. I've tapered at the light end, and that's just going to sit slightly wide of our piece, and then we're just going to curl it around and do exactly the same, except this time we've got more of a tapered end down this white end But same thing, if it gets too big, just push it back down in and just nice and tightly create the curl. And this time I'm just going to, with my blade at an angle, just cut off the back end, so that's also done at a slight angle. So that's our first piece, and I'm going to do exactly the same with the two green pieces. So hopefully you should now have your 5 elements of the cane and some leftover, in my case black, or the outside colour, and this is effectively how we're going to put them together. Although, as I mentioned at the start, I've done this loads of times with 5 elements, and each time I've put them together slightly differently. Mainly the top 3 going together the same, but how you put these 2 bottom elements can change the whole thing. For instance, we could put them both together in like that, but for me, I prefer sort of having one turned over slightly. It just gives a different sort of perspective, because if you have them both the same, then you've got a fairly symmetrical pattern that's not going to look different each way you put them up. So I'm not going to worry too much about gaps on the inside here. I am going to turn the whole thing over to make sure that it's also sitting nicely on that side. We've automatically got our more or less triangular shape, which is what we're looking for. We have, however, still got gaps, and it's not very triangular on these corners either, and if we force this into a triangle without putting a little bit extra on the corners, then these would lose their rounded shapes. They're going to lose the rounded shapes to a certain extent anyway, that's natural, don't worry about that, but as I say, we want to try and minimise that. So I'm going to add some little triangles in here and in here, and then an extra triangle on the side here. I'm going to do that with the black we've got left over. So I'm just going to roll it into a long sausage or snake. And then with my thumb and finger, I'm just going to press down on the tile, because that automatically creates a triangular piece. You can see that, the triangle there. And then all I have to do is just pop down. Obviously you can cut it off neatly with your craft knife, but I just tend to use my thumbnail. And then on the edges I'm just going to stick it the other way up, so it's just creating a little triangle pointing outwards, and that just helps when we're reducing our piece, just to give a little triangular piece on the outside. And you can also do exactly the same on the top. So now we have a triangular cane with our swirls on the inside. I would keep these fairly small if you can, because you don't want too much black. You want the pattern to be the main bit, but just having a little bit, just infilling, just helps keep the swirls. So I'm just going to pack those in, and all we need to do now is reduce the cane. Now, as I said before, I'm doing sort of probably twice the amount you need to do here, because I'm going to do it both a triangular shape and a square shape for you. So hopefully when you reduce yours, it'll be slightly less wide. But all I'm going to do when reducing is I'm just pressing in my thumbs and fingers whilst almost imperceptibly pulling longer, and just rotate and do the same and rotate, and gradually and slowly this cane will become smaller and longer as you go. So I'll fast forward this part of the process for you, because you don't want to sit here watching me do this for ages, but I will put some links in the video information, both on reducing the triangular cane like this, and also on putting cane slices together, both in a square veneer and a triangular or hexagon veneer, which of course is what the triangles make. So if you want more information on how I do any of those parts of the process, do go and have a look at the videos that I link for that. So I've now reduced it down to a stage where we can cut through and see what we've got, but I'm going to cut it into 2 halves and say one I will then reduce in the triangular shape and one I will put into a square shape, and I'll show you how to do that. So, moment of truth, what have we got? And there are the swirls still inside, and creating all sorts of nice patterns when we kaleidoscope them. So say one part I will keep to one side and keep in the triangular format, and I will reduce that down. I'll put it into hexagons for you to show you the individual slices when we take 6 slices, and then I'll also do it into a larger piece. But this piece I'm going to put into a square. So I'm going to put it into a square, and I think because this is getting so dirty, I'm going to put it so that this piece is going to be on the inside. So I'm going to cut it in 2 and marry up the 2 pieces. However, when you're having a square, obviously at the moment our angles are quite sort of sharp because they're about 60 degrees, and really we want sort of a 90-degree angle. So if I know this piece is going to go on the inside, then I know that this is going to be the outside edge. So I can actually push this side up to create more of a wider angle here, and again push it from this side and then push down to change the shape of the triangular cane. So you can see there I've made it slightly more so that it's right angles. So the other thing I'm going to do is, because I'm going to cut this in half and put the 2 pieces together, I'm going to take my biodegradable wet wipe and very carefully, if I can, just on the white, just wipe across the white and take off some of the black. You can see there the difference, so that when it goes together we don't have a black line between the 2 black, or between the 2 pieces. Okay, don't overdo it, and it won't be perfect, but at least it gives us a bit of a fighting chance. I'm just going to take off a bit from this end as well, because I know I'm going to have distortion on that end. And then I can take this piece and keeping my fingers off that white, find the midpoint, chop down through, and then I should be able to marry together these 2 pieces. And of course you can see where that white line goes, and make sure it joins up, and we're going to end up with a square cane. Now at the moment, of course, it's slightly more diamond, so I'm just going to press in on those corner pieces, and once I've got it into more of a square shape, I can just turn it on its side and now start reducing that down in a square shape. With the square cane, once I've got it roughly to the size I want, I will pinch my fingers and go down each of the edges just to pull them out nice and sharp, so that when you put your slices together you don't have any of those rounded gaps in the middle. And then, having done each of the 4 corners, I will of course need to roll over the top to take out any of my little finger impressions and check the size, and I've gone for a 1-inch square. And once I've rechecked the size and checked that it's correct, I'll put that on one side to give it a rest. And we can move on to the triangular cane. And again, I'm going to get that down till across each of these faces is 1 inch on the measuring sheet. Having got this down to the size I wanted, and you probably noticed I chopped off a chunk to keep larger to put on one side because I realised I had more than I needed to show you what I wanted in the tutorial. I'm now going to do exactly the same with the wet wipe and just very carefully just clean off that white stripe, and then I will leave it, because if you've ever done this cleaning process you should then leave the clay to dry completely before you start slicing down. But once this is done and it's had a good sort of 20 minutes, half an hour to dry off, then we will come back and we will start putting the patterns together. So whilst the triangular one's drying, we'll just move on to the rectangular one, or the square one, which whenever you cut the slices they tend to push down ever so slightly, so you normally end up with a rectangle rather than a square. But that's fine because it'll still go together fine, and we can then always roll it or stretch it slightly to make it back into the square. And when you're cutting a square, just cut whatever sizes you feel comfortable with. I tend to look right over the top, which makes it difficult doing a video, so I'll just go to the side for now. But I hold my blade nice and tightly towards the middle, and then just slowly and carefully chop down. And then repeat that for as many slices as you need. So I've got myself a piece of black clay ready, and I'm just going to start putting the slices together on this one. And all I'm going to do is alternate them so that patterns mirror and match up. And as I say, I'll go through this quite quickly just to show you the pattern, but I've got more details on how to put the slices together on another video, and I'll put a link to that in the details below this one for you. Okay, so I've just put them together very roughly there for you, just so you can see how the pattern comes together. And then what I would do is I will roll them together with my cable needle, not the pointy end but just slightly inside, and then I'll get some wax paper, and with the stainless steel soap with the wax paper on top, just burnish over the top of that. But I'll get all that done and show you that at the end when it's all finished and all neatly put together. As I say, I will have got other videos where I've gone through this in great detail, so I'll put a link to that in the details below this one. So there's our square cane, all finished and all put together and all neatened off. And obviously, although I put this one together with this bit in the middle, I could have put this cane together in two other ways to create different patterns. Rather than putting it together down the purple, blue and turquoise side, I could have put it together down this side or down this side, being across in the middle, and just changed it accordingly as I was at that stage. But I'm quite happy with how that one comes out, and I think what I'm going to do is use this to cover a phone stand, and I show you how to do that in the triple blend cane tutorial, and I'll put a link to that in the details below this one. Okay, so let's go back to the triangular cane now. So having cut myself 18 slices of the triangular cane, and I've done this in exactly the same way as we did the square cane, just looking over the top. And with the triangular cane, of course, it's easy because you get to see both sides as you chop down. And we can put this one together, see how this one looks for the third of our patterns. And that starts to give you an idea of how the pattern looks when it repeats. So I haven't put these together or pressed them together carefully, because I'm going to use these to put together to create a nice big hexagon so we can see how all the slices go together. But you can start to see there the three patterns that you'll get from this cane. So I've got 18 slices there. I'm actually going to cut 54 slices in total, so I'm going to take a whole load more. And I've already got a sheet of scrap clay here, which I've marked out with the hexagon. And again, I cover all of this in my bowl tutorial, and I'll put a link to that in the description below this one. So I'll fast forward building up the pattern until we see all the slices and how they look. Once all the pieces are in, I will very gently with the cable needle again go across any joins to make sure they're nicely joined in. And once I've done that with the whole piece, working towards the gaps, making sure all the joins are added in, then I'll take a piece of wax paper and just burnish all the way over the top, and then finish off with my brayer roller going over the whole piece to make sure it's all nice and smooth, and then it's ready and finished and we have our patterned veneer. So there's our large hexagon, all finished, all neatened off and all sort of covered over and then gone over with the wax paper and the stainless steel soap. So that gives you one colour option, and as I mentioned, every time I've done this so far I've put those swirls together in a slightly different format. So what I'm going to do now is to show you some different colour options and also tell you how I put them together slightly differently. So this one is very similar, but when I did the two large pieces, rather than make them shorter, I did them exactly the same as the small pieces. So I put the rolling pin in, again sort of halfway down, having made them that sort of propeller shape. So I didn't change the shape of them, but just did them double the size, and then I had one curling one way, one curling the other, and rather than a triangle I just made a little groove on the underneath and added a groove of black clay down in there. So that's how it came out in the triangular pattern. And I also put it together in the square pattern, and this is what I mean by depending on which way you put it together you get different patterns. So one of them I had this green, blue, purple side being down the middle, and on the other one I had this side being down the middle. And of course there was a third way I could have put them together, but I only needed two ways because I used that one to cover a phone stand. I haven't finished this one off yet, it hasn't been sanded and it hasn't been polished, but it just gives you some idea of what the phone stands look like covered in this type of cane. The colour scheme for this one is actually very similar to what I've done today. Emerald and white, lilac and white, brilliant blue and white, but then I used raspberry and white for this one, and this was a mixture between a little bit of raspberry and a little bit of plum, just to make a darker, sort of more cerise type colour. And they were surrounded by a blend of yellow into apple green into tropical green. And on this one I had slightly longer end bits of the larger canes, but I actually sliced bits of them off so they fitted in that way. So I had one going up that way, one going up that way, but as you can see this one very much went up towards the side rather than staying down at the bottom of the cane. And on this one we had the tropical green and white, ruby and white, lilac and white, raspberry white, and the brilliant blue and white. And for the surround of this one I went from lemon yellow to sunflower yellow to tangerine into copper, and again just done with the black around the side. And that's how that one came out, and that is the hexagon done in that one. And I haven't yet done this one as a square, but I reckon that will look nice as a square as well. And this was the first one I was doing when I was experimenting and doing the swirls. And on this one I did a slight different thing because I added in a bullseye cane at the top end of each of the swirls, but I decided for the tutorial I was doing today it was just a little bit too complex. But of course you can add things in. I've also got another bullseye cane, just a little added extra interest, and that gives you something like this when you put them together in the hexagons. So the colours for this, I hadn't done them all to white, so this one was lemon yellow into apple green into tropical green, emerald green into turquoise into white, got apple green into aqua, and then we've got aqua, peppermint and brilliant blue, and then emerald, brilliant blue and peppermint. So you can just experiment and put them all together, and however you put them together you will get a slightly different pattern, but that sort of swirly effect still comes through in your finished piece. So that's the end of this project finished. As I said, it was a new element I was trying in cane design, and putting 5 of them together just gives a nice effect which you can use in lots of different ways in your polymer clay creations. I hope you enjoyed that one, and I hope you have some fun with it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I really appreciate those of you who subscribe, so thank you for doing that. That's it for this one, so I'm off to come up with some new ideas, and hopefully I'll see you at my next video tutorial. Bye for now. Bye.